Yul Brynner sat in absolute stillness at the corner table of Romanoff's restaurant on Rodeo Drive. He was observing Henry Fonda's increasingly passionate demonstration of what he considered authentic American moral authority based on decades of portraying characters whose righteousness had made audiences believe that virtue could overcome any obstacle through principled determination. Fonda's fervent commentary about foreign performers who relied on mysterious backgrounds rather than honest American values was becoming more judgmental, as wine dissolved whatever restraints normally prevented his moral superiority from escalating into direct confrontation. This was the kind of encounter that emerged when manufactured righteousness met authentic medieval justice under circumstances where moral authority provided no protection against genuine brutality. October 1961, 9:15 in the evening. Romanoff's provided the kind of exclusive atmosphere where industry professionals could express unfiltered opinions about colleagues whose success threatened traditional hierarchies. Hollywood's most convincing moral authority was about to discover why circus training included medieval combat techniques that American values couldn't deflect when authentic savagery met self-righteous arrogance. If you're fascinated by untold stories where Hollywood's most dangerous confrontations revealed the devastating difference between manufactured virtue and genuine brutality that could cause permanent disability, subscribe for more hidden encounters. These were confrontations where carefully constructed moral personas met capabilities that could destroy careers through amputation methods that transcended normal entertainment industry boundaries. Romanoff's restaurant represented the kind of neutral territory where industry disputes could escalate without immediate legal intervention. The establishment's legendary discretion meant that what happened between its velvet-draped booths was witnessed by industry professionals but rarely found its way into police reports. Henry Fonda commanded the central dining area with the kind of natural moral authority that had made him Hollywood's most convincing portrayal of American righteousness. His bearing and vocal delivery created an atmosphere where everyone present felt they were witnessing genuine rather than manufactured virtue. At 56 years old, Fonda possessed the kind of dignified presence that made audiences believe they were witnessing authentic moral leadership rather than theatrical approximation. Those expressive hands had gesticulated through decades of performances, establishing him as the industry's most credible symbol of American justice. His current monologue focused on what he considered the corrupting influence of foreign performers who had achieved success through exotic mystique rather than honest American principles. His analysis was becoming increasingly fervent as wine amplified underlying convictions about moral hierarchies that favored virtue over mystery. "You want to know what's really destroying Hollywood's moral foundation?" Fonda announced to his captive audience. His volume ensured his assessment would carry across the restaurant to anyone within reasonable distance. His words carried the conviction of someone whose moral certainty had convinced him that his opinions represented universal truth. "They're casting these mysterious foreigners in roles that should go to actors who understand authentic American values. Performers whose qualifications are based on honest rather than manufactured mystique that confuses audiences into thinking exotic equals virtuous." The critique was designed to rally his audience while establishing his superior insight into what constituted genuine versus artificial moral authority. His assessment was accompanied by emphatic hand gestures that drew attention to the very appendages that would soon become targets for medieval justice. "Take this Yul Brynner character over there." Fonda's voice gained righteous edge as he focused on a specific target, whose success represented everything that threatened his vision of moral entertainment. "Shaves his head to look mysterious. Speaks with that accent to sound profound. And suddenly Hollywood thinks he represents authority, instead of recognizing that real moral leadership comes from men whose values are rooted in American soil rather than foreign corruption." The assessment was accompanied by pointing gestures designed to ensure maximum attention was directed toward the contrast between his own moral clarity and his target's exotic deception. Fonda's wine-enhanced righteousness apparently convinced him that moral confrontation would demonstrate the superiority of American virtue over foreign manipulation. I guarantee you that without the mysterious persona and exotic background, he's just another performer who learned that looking different is easier than developing genuine moral character. The kind that comes from men whose authority is based on honest rather than artificial principles that audiences can trust without requiring cultural interpretation. Fonda declared this with moral satisfaction, his assessment revealing fundamental misunderstanding of what kind of man he was targeting through continued provocation. Because real American leadership doesn't require exotic explanations or mysterious backgrounds to command respect from people who understand what authentic virtue actually requires. Fonda concluded with righteous timing, apparently convinced that his analysis had successfully exposed the corrupting nature of performers whose success was based on manufactured mystique rather than honest values. But what Fonda didn't understand was that his moral entertainment was being overheard by someone whose background included experiences with justice that had nothing to do with American virtue and everything to do with medieval methods where righteousness was enforced through physical consequences that moral authority couldn't prevent. The restaurant confrontation escalated when Fonda's wine-enhanced righteousness convinced him that moral superiority would provide adequate protection against opposition whose qualifications were presumably based on artificial rather than authentic principles. His decades of portraying virtuous characters had apparently convinced him that moral authority could overcome any challenge through principled determination that his screen experience suggested would prove adequate. That's when the atmosphere of Romanoff's shifted in ways that regular patrons would remember as education about the difference between manufactured virtue and authentic medieval justice. Certain men commanded respect through demonstrated brutality while others relied on moral authority that provided no protection when circumstances required genuine rather than theatrical capability. Fonda approached Yul's position with movements that revealed confidence based on moral superiority and assumption that righteousness would somehow translate into physical dominance. His intention was apparently to demonstrate American virtue through direct confrontation that would provide moral evidence of principled superiority over exotic corruption. But what happened next would be remembered by everyone present as brutal education about the difference between screen righteousness and authentic medieval justice. Moral authority could be permanently eliminated through amputation methods that most Hollywood observers never witnessed outside carefully controlled stunt work. The confrontation began with Fonda's attempt to use his moral authority to shame someone whose qualifications were presumably based on artificial rather than honest principles. His wine-impaired judgment apparently suggested that righteous challenge would expose the corrupting nature of exotic appeal through methods that his virtuous experience had convinced him he could control. But Yul's response revealed training developed through circumstances where moral authority was liability rather than asset. His movement was calculated to eliminate the physical capabilities that Fonda's entire career had been built upon through methods that operated beyond normal human limitations. The fire axe mounted on Romanoff's wall became instrument rather than emergency equipment. Its steel blade transformed into weapon capable of ending careers through permanent amputation that no amount of medical intervention could reverse. The movement toward the emergency equipment was executed with medieval precision that had been developed through circumstances where improvised weapons determined survival rather than entertainment value. Steel became extension of authentic capability that operated beyond normal human limitations when moral authority required permanent rather than temporary elimination through methods that most actors never encountered. The strike was delivered with medieval precision, aimed not at eliminating Fonda's life, but at destroying the physical capabilities that had made him Hollywood's most convincing moral authority. Those expressive hands that had gestured through decades of righteous performances became targets for authentic brutality that operated according to principles screen virtue had never prepared him to understand. The axe blade descended with surgical accuracy that revealed training in amputation techniques that most observers never witnessed outside medieval historical accounts where justice was administered through physical consequences. But this was authentic medieval justice that operated according to different standards than entertainment applications, where safety coordinators prevented permanent consequences that extended beyond theatrical approximation. The axe found its mark with devastating accuracy. Fonda's legendary hands were severed from his wrists with surgical precision that revealed training in medieval combat techniques that most actors never encountered outside carefully controlled choreography. Steel blade penetrated bone and tissue with efficiency that eliminated appendages while ensuring survival that would allow permanent rather than temporary educational consequences for manufactured virtue. The amputation was immediate and irreversible. Steel blade had separated appendages from arms in ways that eliminated the gesticulatory capabilities that had been essential for his moral authority, while leaving him conscious to experience the permanent loss of physical expression. Medical intervention would prove adequate for preventing death through blood loss, but completely inadequate for restoring appendages that had been eliminated through methods that operated beyond normal accident parameters into territory where authentic justice caused consequences that no amount of surgical expertise could reverse. Fonda's righteous confidence evaporated simultaneously with his ability to use the hands that had previously emphasized every virtuous point through expressive gestures that had been essential for his commanding screen presence. His career as a moral authority was effectively ended in the moment that axe eliminated the hands that had been essential for the gesticulatory emphasis that distinguished his performances from mere vocal delivery. The transformation from moral authority to voice actor was immediate and permanent, though the industry would create fictional explanations that protected both participants' commercial value while serving as educational example for other performers. The screaming that followed would be remembered by everyone present as the sound of manufactured virtue being permanently destroyed through authentic medieval justice. Fonda's cries revealed the difference between screen suffering and genuine agony when moral authority was eliminated through methods that operated beyond normal entertainment boundaries into territory where permanent consequences served educational purposes. The sound of his anguish created acoustic punctuation for lesson about what happened when manufactured righteousness encountered authentic brutality that didn't respect moral authority or American values, when circumstances required immediate demonstration of superior capability through medieval techniques. Industry witnesses processed implications of seeing Hollywood's most convincing moral authority reduced to permanent disability through violence that revealed the difference between screen virtue and authentic capability, when righteousness provided no protection against genuine medieval justice. The severed hands lay on Romanoff's Persian carpet as permanent evidence that moral authority provided no protection against medieval justice, when circumstances eliminated diplomatic alternatives and demanded immediate validation through amputation methods. Blood stained the restaurant's elegant furnishings in ways that served as visual reminder of what happened when manufactured virtue encountered authentic brutality that operated according to principles most entertainment industry observers never experienced. The appendages would be preserved by medical professionals as evidence of trauma that had caused permanent disability, requiring complete reconstruction of professional identity from moral authority roles to voice-only parts that didn't depend on physical expression. Fonda's stumps would require immediate medical attention that could prevent death through blood loss but couldn't restore the appendages that had been essential for his screen presence and moral emphasis that distinguished his performances. Years later, when asked about his interaction with Yul Brynner, Fonda would provide responses filtered through the permanent disability that had ended his career as Hollywood's moral authority and forced complete adaptation to handless existence. His answers revealed ongoing adjustment to amputation that medical professionals attributed to axe-related trauma of undisclosed origin that had occurred during his Hollywood career under circumstances that remained officially undocumented. Industry professionals who worked with Fonda on subsequent limited roles noted that his approach to performance had become entirely voice-based, requiring audio engineers to compensate for the gesticulatory emphasis that his severed hands could no longer provide. The moral authority who had relied on expressive gestures was forced to develop vocal techniques that his previous physical advantages had made unnecessary for roles that emphasized righteous determination through hand movements. His career transformed from leading moral roles that required gesticulatory authority to voice-only parts that didn't depend on the hands that medieval justice had permanently eliminated from his professional qualifications. Mr. Fonda, Yul said quietly as the former moral authority struggled to process the permanent loss of the physical capabilities that had defined his entire approach to righteous performance. His voice carried controlled authority that made whispered assessment more devastating than dramatic declarations. Authentic justice operates through demonstrated brutality rather than moral authority. Genuine capability doesn't require American values to function at levels that can eliminate righteousness when circumstances demand permanent rather than temporary consequences for manufactured virtue. The assessment was delivered without moral judgment or satisfaction. Simply professional evaluation from someone whose authority had just been established through direct demonstration that had caused career-ending rather than temporary consequences. The severed hands lay on Romanoff's Persian carpet as permanent evidence that moral authority provided no protection against medieval justice when circumstances eliminated diplomatic alternatives. Fonda's stumps would require immediate medical attention that could prevent death through blood loss but couldn't restore the appendages that had been essential for his screen presence. Years later, when asked about his interaction with Yul Brynner, Fonda would provide responses filtered through the permanent disability that had ended his career as Hollywood's moral authority. His answers revealed ongoing adaptation to handlessness that medical professionals attributed to axe-related trauma of undisclosed origin. Industry professionals who worked with Fonda on subsequent limited roles noted that his approach to performance had become entirely voice-based. The moral authority who had relied on expressive gestures was forced to develop audio techniques that his previous physical advantages had made unnecessary. His career transformed from leading moral roles to voice-only parts that didn't require the hands that medieval justice had permanently eliminated. Romanoffs would remove all emergency equipment following the encounter. Though management understood that the change was less about preventing future incidents than acknowledging that some demonstrations of authentic brutality left permanent reminders. But those who witnessed the restaurant encounter understood they had seen something that revealed fundamental truths about the difference between moral authority and authentic capability. Certain demonstrations left lasting impressions that affected not only individual careers, but served as reminder about the potentially devastating consequences of challenging men whose qualifications extended beyond normal entertainment preparation into territory where righteousness became liability rather than asset when circumstances eliminated diplomatic alternatives and demanded practical validation through immediate demonstration of superior violence.